morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's session, Track B, Innovative Talent Strategies in Global Enterprises. Today's session, number 4, is on the return on investment for human capital, a business asset. What we will do is each speaker we have 3 speakers and we're discussing. Each speaker will briefly introduce themselves, and then each will have 15 minutes to make their presentation. We'll turn to the discussant, who will ask each presenter a question, and then I promise to give time for at least a couple of questions from the audience at the end. So let me go for the introductions with each speaker, starting with Mark. Should be. Okay. Is that, okay, sorry. I'm just learning the technology. My name's Mark Woodhouse. I'm basically the director responsible for UK and Europe for the Saratoga PwC business, and essentially, as you'll hear later, the work that we do with organisations is around putting metrics and measurements to people performance in an organisation.
My name is Don Cooper-Williams. I'm the Executive Director for Marketing and Alliances for SAS for Asia Pacific, and I spend a lot of my time talking to audiences like this and speaking to clients around performance management, and my presentation today will talk very much about the implementation of performance and how it drives down to the bottom line and brings a return to organizations.
반갑습니다. KT에서 HR 전략팀을 맡고 있는 이승철입니다.
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 3일+1스쿠퍼스에서 HR 컨설팅을 담당하고 있는 김강호 파트너라고 합니다.
Thank you, and let's turn right away to Mark Woodhouse.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. What I want to do for the next 15 minutes is to share with you some thoughts and some work that we do on how do you measure the impact of the people contribution to organizations, and how can we align those measures to business strategy. And basically, I think just to start off the process, I think what we find in many organizations is that there's considerable emphasis placed on, if you like, above-the-line reporting, so the financials, etc. of an organization. We find very little work goes on in organizations in an attempt to measure those invisible assets, i.e. the people that we have in the organization and the sorts of contributions they're making. We're increasingly finding that organizations are being asked to put more information into the public arena in their annual reports around what's happening with the people element of the business. So the work that we do with organizations is to try and help them to understand how, first of all, to identify the metrics that are necessary, or the measures, how to align them to the actual organizational strategy, and how to use them to help them to monitor progress in terms of a set of targets and goals around the people aspect of the business. If we look at a relatively straightforward model, I guess, of sustainability, and I think most organizations are looking at delivering sustainable performance to their shareholders. And so from that perspective, we have a model that we tend to look at around the whole issue of employee engagement and employee contribution. So our sort of assumptions are around effective leadership, as you can see, leading to high levels of engagement. And we know that there are relationships between, for example, high levels of engagement and high levels of customer service, leading into then having superior talent. And I think some of the sessions that you may have been to on the conference so far has talked about how do you identify and develop talent, creating the sort of innovation that we want in organizations, therefore creating shareholder and stakeholder value. The key question that we've worked on for 15 to 20 years now is, can you actually measure some of that? Can you put a measurement framework and a scorecard in place? And then secondly, is it possible to benchmark those results outside the organization with comparator organizations? And I think we're increasingly finding that chief executives are much more focused now, not just on the cost of the HR function itself, but more importantly on the effectiveness and efficiency. And I think chief executives are rightly asking now a number of questions of HR, which really are requiring HR to give more data-driven answers as well as the qualitative type of answers. So questions around how are we performing against the competition, what's our people contribution, how engaged is the workforce, are we developing the right talent, do we have good leaders, etc., and how efficient are those things being delivered to the organization. And if we look at some of just the key metrics, and I think this is always an interesting one to me, that if we look at a typical HR function cost, it's about 0.3% of an organization's cost from the data that we use, UK, Europe, Asia Pacific and North America. But then if we look at the cost of the people part of a business, I mean, it's anything between 20 to 50%, depending whether you're in manufacturing or whether you're in a sort of a high intellectual capital type business like PricewaterhouseCoopers, for example, where much of the cost is significantly higher. But it's also quite interesting to us that although that 20 to 50% of cost is there, and it is, if we believe in what we're hearing in the conference over the 2 days, that people really are our greatest asset, and it should be an appreciating asset in an organization. And it is, I believe, a prime driver to bottom line performance. We don't spend too much time in organizations really understanding the performance of that in terms of measurement. And I think there's a lot of focus on the HR function costs, which are relatively small in comparison with the impact that the function is having in terms of that 20 to 50% of cost. In a sense, the sort of approach that we tend to use in measuring human capital, we tend to look at what's the current baseline. So in other words, what's the current strategy for the business? What's the HR strategy currently? And how is that actually being delivered in terms of the delivery model? More importantly, how are we measuring that? Do we have any numbers that really tell us whether we're being effective in delivering that? Once we've got that baseline position, we can then go on to say, what are the future business challenges, next 3 to 5 years? What sort of actions does HR need to take in response to that change in business strategy, for example? And what are the real measures that enable us to track performance? Not just track performance internally, but also look at some external tracking against key competition. So it's bringing together a scorecard of metrics that enables the organization to actually do that. And when we're looking particularly at structuring those measures, clearly what we're trying to do is to look at what's the current financial position in terms of our financial impact, and then what are the future things that will impact on the business performance around people. And that's around attracting, developing, retaining and utilizing the talent effectively across the organization, whether that's at a country level, a region level, or in fact a global level. Just in terms of very quickly showing you some of the sort of metrics that we work with in an organizational setting, we have a cluster around human capital, so financial, productivity, return on investment type measures. We have a set of measures around what we call employee engagement, so they're very much around resourcing, compensation, learning and development, human capital. Metrics around the actual functions and the functional structure, so not just HR, all back office functions in the sense of how they contribute to the business, and then more extended portfolio of metrics around things like shared services. So if organizations have shared services, how do we measure the effectiveness of that? I think increasingly we're finding organizations are looking for talent management type metrics in terms of return on investment. And I think my final observation on those measures is there are quite a number of measures, but what we're looking to do is to cluster them in a way that focuses those measures on what the organization is trying to deliver, in terms of its business strategy, and therefore what HR is trying to do in response to that. And when we talk about the internal comparisons, we can also look at external comparisons, so we can see how we're performing against the marketplace or a sample of similar organizations. If we're doing this effectively, we can look at trends over time, so we can set targets and goals around people performance. We can track them year on year. And more importantly, we can go out and test our assumptions on an annual basis against the external marketplace. And the powerful thing I think with this is that it gives HR a real opportunity to become the business partner that I think we're seeking to become as we develop the function. So it gives us a real set of tools to talk business numbers. So just some very quick thoughts. I think in designing a framework of this nature, it's very important that we first of all align what we're doing to the business strategy. We have standardized terminology, and a lot of the work that we do in terms of the Saratoga business is clearly to develop definitions, to use those definitions consistently across an organization. And it's also, I guess, and we're going to hear a little bit about management information systems in the next session, but it's how do we get the right processes in place and platforms in place to enable us to create the important management information that we need in an organization. I see a lot of organizations that produce very thick reports of data which goes to the executive group, and it's looked at, and I think there's so much data there, it's actually difficult to understand how an executive can make decisions on that data. So we're looking at a very small number, maybe 18 to 20 key metrics that enable an organization to measure its performance. So just very quickly, how do we develop that? Well, have we said, and how are organizations using that? They're using it, first of all, to develop that real evidence-based. HR is really talking the business language. It's talking numbers, which CEOs tend to like. I'm sure you all agree as HR professionals. It's using data. It's improving the HR function's position in terms of adding value to the organization. And in a sense, it's helping us to understand what best practice really is. And we can go to a CEO and really talk hard impact numbers. So by doing A, B, and C in our HR strategy, here is the actual bottom line impact and return on investment for those organizations. And just really to show you that the metrics that can be developed can be used in a business balanced scorecard sense, so we can actually use it in a way to support balanced scorecards. We can build a human capital balanced scorecard. And finally, just to show you how one can take an example, have a business strategy, looking at, and this is a real live organizational example, and how we can cascade from understanding the business strategy, the priorities, the actual HR strategy that's needed. So what do we need in an organizational capability sense and a people capability sense? What are the key business drivers? And you'll see in this example, in the boxes, and you see support company growth, efficiency, productivity. These were all elements of the organization's strategy. And below that, you'll see some of the types of metrics that we would apply in that situation. So that's just a very, very quick run through of measuring human capitals in organization. And I'm just going to leave you with one side as a question. Having listened to that very quick summary of aligning metrics, if you think about your own organization, can you actually demonstrate the return on investment from your people in the organization? Difficult question to answer, but one perhaps to think about as we listen to the rest of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for a very timely presentation and important link between the HR function and human capital. The next speaker, Don Cooper Williams.
Thank you very much. I think we live in a very interesting world at the moment, and we have change coming very rapidly on to all organizations. And due to rapid change and what we would call an inflection point coming in terms of how companies manage, I have a firm belief today that leading companies and companies that want to prosper in the future will need to have a very conscious capability of incorporating the HR organization holistically into the rest of the company. It cannot remain as an isolated division. It cannot be siloed, but it needs to be part and parcel of what the metrics, what the vision, what the outcomes of that company are. So in my short time, I'm going to run through quite a lot of material and hope that this material will give you an indication of where we need to go, and that's not working, so I'm going to have to revert to analog. So I'm going to cover four things very rapidly: the optimization of the workforce, contribution to profitability, an integration into the business so that the performance metrics capability that is expected from your employees is not isolated to simple KPIs of a very thin layer that have no bearing on the strategy of the organization, and then to move to a point of informed decisions. Decisions need to be taken on facts that are derived from data that is not only relevant, comprehensive, but at the fingertips of those that need to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. So first of all, let's talk about the optimization of the workforce. The workforce itself is very important. Performance management begins and ends with people. Let me repeat that. Performance management begins and ends with people, not necessarily with systems, not necessarily with a hierarchical situation where this is only the remit of those that sit at the top of the organization, but with the entire workforce and how they will manage. There are a number of surveys out there. This one comes out of Accenture. 75% of high-performance businesses demonstrated finance and performance management mastery. Over 1,000 organizations were tested for this. However, there are some very interesting other metrics that we need to look at over here. First of all, what is the evidence that is out there? And in speaking to these organizations, a few things were asked. Wrong metrics were out there. At least 70% of companies employ metrics that lack statistical validity. So there are metrics, but what are they based on? They're based on gut feel, they're based on experience, they're based on best practice out there. And who is your best practice? Your neighboring company or what somebody else did before? And you can read these for yourself, they're in the system. So cost of quality data or data quality. Estimates spent on data warehousing applications are in excess of 40 billion per annum, with more than 60% of it is spent on cleansing the data. So that tells you that a lot of metrics and a lot of outcomes are measured on incorrect data. Or the data is only corrected at a time when it's too late to take the decision that would make an impact on your profitability, on your competitiveness, or on change. There are common myths out there. The myths are people do as they are measured. Well, that's not true. If people did as they were measured, we would have a lot of schizophrenics in our organizations. The truth is that they focus on desired behaviors, and that's what needs to be looked at with aligned metrics. Clear metrics always help. Well, not true. Value-focused strategy is critical to identify the critical few that matter. I meet companies where they have hundreds of metrics per division. that have no correlation at all. And people feel that they have done the right thing for their organization. Managers feel that the only way to manage is to place on individuals, departments, and workers a huge amount of metrics to keep them honest. In the end, nothing is derived from that. There's a myth. We can lift metrics and targets from similar organizations. Many are here today and you want to hear what other organizations are doing and you say, I love the metrics that company A has or company B has. It cannot come from focusing and copying another company. There are examples, but this needs to come from internal and from a culture that is metric-based. Measures must be tied to compensation. Well, few simple, robust measures tied to compensation, only after the process is proven. So if you want to have compensation measures, make sure you have a process in place that will work it. We move rapidly on. Contribution to profitability. So why do you measure? What are the performance measurements that you have in your organization? Are they based on a return to capital? Return on capital, or are you basing them on profitability per employee? Might be a very different way that you look at your organization and how you take it forward. But these fundamentals need to be in place before you place a KPI on any worker anywhere within your organization, or on a division, or on a strategy. Well, let's have a look at this survey. This was done by an organization called Better Management, and they said these were the 5 top expected benefits from employee performance management: strategic and cross-departmental alignment, budgeting and planning aligned with strategy, resource alignment and optimization. But have a look at it. Here are the keys. Alignment is one of the top 3. So here is an issue. They were saying the benefit had to be that there had to be alignment with collaboration and accountability, alignment with strategy, alignment and optimization. So you see a mantra coming through here that there needs to be alignment. It cannot be that the performance capability that you put into your organization is isolated by division or siloed by division. And of course, financial transparency and revenue growth. But look at this, cross-departmental. Cross-departmental. And the question you need to go away with is, how are you departmentally driving performance management? Is it cross-department, or is it siloed by those departments? Well, what are the challenges? Lack of integration between systems and multiple vendors. Insufficient information is available to people to make a decision. For performance management needs to get to a point that people can take decisions that are going to impact the activity and behavior that they are capable of doing or performing in front of their customers. But let me go through each one of these very quickly for you. What is the answer to this? Well, first of all, data integration and interoperability standards need to be in place. The data that you have in your organization, I'll show you a schematic shortly, is vast. It needs to be integrated for you to have a performance management capability. Insufficient information. Well, the information is there. Did you know that information or data is doubling right now, according to the best estimates, at about every 11 months? The data in your organization will double. By 2010, we are told that data or the information with it will double every 11 hours. We are on a journey that is incredibly impacting, and we're going to hit a wall soon if we don't understand how to use data. So the way we store it and the way that we can scale with that data will be important. Access to information. Well, there's a lot of information in your organization, but I see heads nodding around the room here this morning. You don't have access to that information, or you have access at a time that is inappropriate. You need the access when you're in a crisis. You need the access when the customer calls. The person that has the KPI needs access to the data so they can perform the operation that will be relevant to their measure, so that they can have a sense of worth, that they can have a sense of fulfillment at the end of the day, that they did the job that they were asked to do. There's no role-based situation. So we need role-based. There is the same information comes differently to different departments. The HR department needs to see the information that is integrated in a particular way. Finance needs to see it in their language and in their way from the same sources. Distribution, sales, all need to be integrated. It needs to be role-based. The cost of technology. Why? Because we have accepted technology or brought on technology or adapted it over the years, and now it sits within our organization. And I met a CIO the other day of one of your large banks, and he told me that one of his big issues is the large number of suppliers, and how does he bring them down to a point that they can save money and have a single vendor that is looking after them. And then the last one, no intelligence in the scorecards. Well, there are scorecards and there's scorecards. If your scorecard is derived from a Excel spreadsheet, it might have vital information, but only to that Excel spreadsheet, and will not be integrated with the other data of the organization. Therefore, it is a very thin dashboard, and it might not be giving you what you really need in terms of going forward. Well, one of the answers is, and we see this is in business, on the vertical axis we have operational platforms that have been invested in. Your ERP platforms or the legacy platforms that run your organization. We also have your productivity platforms, the one that drives your email and all of those, and they are well understood, well invested. But the question I'll leave with you this morning, do you have an intelligence platform within your organization that can triangulate with the other two and ensure that the data that resides both in your operational and in your productivity platform is pulled into an intelligence platform and allows you to take informed decisions at a time when they need to be taken, including around your HR. The other thing is that there's cultural resistance, challenges around culture. And the question you need to ask is, do you have a culture of measurement? Do you have a culture of performance measurement that resides in your organization? Your CFO might have it. Your CFO might be dwelling on this. The COO might be doing that. But is the CEO culturally adapted to being performance-driven all the way through the organization? Departments, one of the challenges, don't share information. We have information silos everywhere. It's held there. You have somebody who says, it's my information. I gathered it. I paid for it. It came from my budget. Therefore, you can't have it. Little accountability around what comes out of that is prevalent, and that's a challenge. Insufficient communication of the strategy. How do you communicate that strategy and the data out to your constituents? Do they have to go and look for it on a web page? Do they have to go to a special meeting to hear about it? Or is it instantly accessible on a day-to-day basis to give them a feeling of self-worth at one end, but also to equip them with data that will eventually affect your brand, which will affect your bottom line? And then an ineffective strategy execution as well. Well, my belief is that you need to have a model, and this is one model. I know it's a bit of an eye chart. It looks like the Hollywood Bowl. But really what it is, it's a depiction of how performance management needs to give your organization a single view of the truth. A single view of the extract of the data that is in your organization. Unless you have this, you have a partial view, or you have a view that is distinctive only in a particular area. And it is role-based. If you look across the top, if you can read the slide there, it says very clearly there that this is a role-based situation. This laser's not strong enough to go that far. Forgive it. It's right on the top. So, a role-based view of performance that covers both the executive, the business manager, the IT professional, and the contributor. So if it's not role-based, it cannot give to them the data in the way, or the performance management KPIs in the way that they understand them. And it needs to be based on a number of issues that I'll come to as we go through the presentation. But it's more than technology. Do not get fooled that it's only technology. I got asked a question, well, if we bought your technology or this technology or that technology, would it solve my problem? No, it needs to be encompassed around three other areas. A culture within your organization that drives metrics. A culture that understands it. people that are involved with it and people that buy into it, the type of people that join your organization need to be adapted to this. And then, of course, processes that are in place to ensure that the alignment that was missing is now put in place, that the processes will drive that on a day-to-day basis. Well, how do we do this? Now, this is well known. Most companies have a strategy and planning department, and strategy and planning is important. Then we go to the right-hand side and we talk about how do we process the execution and do the monitoring. But then there's a third aspect on the left-hand side or on your right-hand side which speaks of the modeling improvement and deployment. So three aspects of this. But let me put them in a linear way for you and let you understand them. If we look at the first one, well, this is a simplistic one. It's just looking at report performance, and most companies have this. I can't dwell on it because my time is short. If we, incorporate that with strategy and planning, it brings us into an area where not only do we have a report basis within our organization, but now we can manage and control performance to align to the business. Remember, that was one of the impediments, that was one of the issues, and one of the benefits that managers said they needed. So how do we manage, control that aligns to the business? Beware that you're not measuring that has no alignment to the outcomes that you are wanting or that your management team wants for the organization. You might be measuring that has no profits in it at all as a measure. I have 1 minute, and I don't know how I'm going to do it in 1 minute. Okay. That's important. You can have a look at my slides. I've also documented them. One of the things that needs to be done is an evaluation in your organization. People want to move rapidly from having simply an operational model to an innovation model. And there are a series of steps that you need to take. This is an evaluation model that allows you to understand where you are, to understand people, process, and culture. Most organizations that we meet in the marketplace are around about level 3. They're at an integration level now. They're aligning their business. Level 4 is getting to an optimized area. And then finally, few companies are really taking their performance management and using their organization and the people in their organization to drive them to an innovated area. Well, let me go very quickly. Operations is where HR is. This is a role-based situation. I said earlier, HR needs to be integrated into the whole mass. If you look at this model, we have a number of departments there. This will speak their language. And we move there, we move to HR and to human capital intelligence. So not only is there intelligence that comes out of IT, out of the financial side of the organization, out of the distribution side of the organization, but out of this functionality. And I'll use this as my last slide, just to this penultimate slide. All of the data in the organization is important to looking at a performance management capability for HR. If you leave any of those out, you will have defaults in there. You will have something that is not comprehensive enough. That is brought together into a single data mart that allows you to come back to strategy alignment and scorecarding. We heard that from the previous speaker. Opportunity exploration and detailed analysis and reporting. However, they need to move further down and they need to drive employee behavioral models, metrics and benchmarks, and even retirement forecasts. Here's a simple thing to look at. How many of you in your companies have a map like this that talks about the age by gender within your organization? This is an age distribution pyramid. Just looking at that, you can already see what the issues are. This company employs people at an average of 38 years of age. They have a lot of people in the organization that are above 38 years of age. They have very few entering at the bottom. So just from this one graphic, this graphic that is available on a moment-by-moment basis as the changes happen by department, by company, by branch, and even by country, will allow the HR executive who is performance management alert to understand that there are things that need to be done from a strategic point of view to align the business and allow them to grow by what they see there. And I'll lie to you, I have one more, and I'll end with that one. And it's this one. Oh, we could have had so much fun. A commitment to intelligence needs to be part of it. If you're going to move into performance management, from an HR point of view, if it's going to link and align to the business strategy of your organization, then your organization needs to work towards having a commitment to intelligence. And you can see, just on this scorecard, there needs to be an understanding of the balance between human capital management, the culture of the organization, the knowledge processes that you have put in place, and last but not least, the infrastructure that you need to buy. If you only started infrastructure, you've done your organization a disservice. Look at the other three. They were implicit to bringing about a world-class performance management capability. Thank you, and my apologies for taking another minute.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for the presentation on appropriate measures for human capital. Third speaker, Mr. Sung-Cho Lee. Mr. Lee.
예, 반갑습니다. KT 이승철입니다. 오늘 제가 발표할 내용은 기업 조직 내에서의 협업을 통한 고성과 창출의 문제가 되겠습니다. 전통적으로 보면은 인적 자원 관리에 있어서 크게 두 가지 패러다임이 존재한다고 할 수 있습니다. 다들 아시겠지만 사람 중심의 일본 기업식 인적 자원 관리 모델과 그다음에 직무 중심의 국내 기업식 인적 자원 관리 모델이 존재한다고 할 수 있습니다. 전통적으로 국내 기업들 같은 경우는 일본식 기업의 관리 모델을 벤치마킹해 왔었다라고 할 수 있고요. 근데 외환 위기 이후에 국내 기업의 관리 시스템에 있어서 글로벌 스탠다드의 도입이 굉장히 중요한 사회적 화두로 대두함으로 인해서 인적 자원 관리에 있어서도 패러다임의 분화가 요구되기 시작했습니다. 그러한 패러다임의 분화에서의 큰 방향은 물론 북미 기업식의 직무 중심 그리고 성과주의적 인적 자원 관리 시스템으로의 전환이라고 할 수 있고, 이러한 패러다임의 큰 특징은 세 가지로 볼 수가 있습니다. 첫째가 이전과 달리 개인 관점에, 그러니까 개인 수준에서 엄격한 성과 관리, 그 다음에 이러한 성과와 연계해서 개인별로 보상을 차별화하는 시스템이 도입이 됐고요. 그리고 기업의 사업 성과와 연계해서 기업의 규모, 그러니까 인적 자원의 규모를 적극적으로 이제 조정하고자 하는 움직임들이 이 시기부터 이제 도입이 되었다고 할 수가 있습니다. 그래서 이러한 성과주의적 인사관리 시스템이 과연 성공적이었냐 본다면은 과거 지난 한 10년 동안의 이런 성과주의적 인사관리의 결과로서 나타나는 몇 가지 부작용이 있다고 할 수가 있겠습니다. 무엇보다도 기업 내에서 직원들, 개개인들 간의 지나친 경쟁으로 인해서 기업 내에서의 어떤 지식 공유에 장벽이 쌓이기 시작했다라는 점을 볼 수가 있고요. 다음으로는 평생 직장의 개념이 붕괴됨으로 인해서 특히 이제 기업이 고용 조정을 하고자 할 때 이러한 부정적인 심리가 회사 전체적으로 굉장히 급속하게 전파됨으로 인해서 심각한 사기자의 문제를 야기하는 경우가 있다라는 것이고요. 그다음에 마지막으로 얘기할 수 있는 것이 종업원적 선택의 문제입니다. 사실 이전까지만 하더라도 국내에서 외부 노동 시장의 기능이라는 것은 굉장히 미미했음에도 불구하고 최근에는 이제 외부 노동 시장이 상당히 활성화되고 있는 추세입니다. 근데 실제 기업의 입장에서 보면은 기업의 성과가 나빠서 고용 조정을 하고자 할 때 많은 고성과자들이 오히려 긍정적인 혜택을 받고 외부 노동 시장을 이용해서 적극적으로 이직을 하는 이런 종업원 역선택의 문제가 사실 나타나고 있다라고 할 수 있고, 이런 문제점들을 놓고 볼 때 과연 지난 10년 동안의 성과주의 인사 시스템이 성공적이라고 할 수 있느냐라는 것에 대해서 객관적으로 검증해 볼 필요가 있는 시점에 도달했다라고 할 수 있고, 이런 점에서 볼 때 지금 논의되고 있는 인적 자본이라는 개념은 상당히 우리가 주목해 볼 만한 가치가 있는 그 개념이라고 할 수가 있겠습니다. 그래서 뭐 개념적으로 볼 때 인적 자본이라는 것이 실제로 그 개인이 회사 내에서 담당하고 있는 직무와 연관된 지식이나 기술, 스킬과 같은 것이 체화되어 있는 그 개인들을 얘기한다라고 할 수가 있는데, 이런 그 인적 자산에 대해서 최근에 보면 여러 가지 그 효율성을 측정할 수 있는 그 휴먼 캐피탈 인덱스들이 개발이 되고 있고, 이런 인적 자산 지수들을 포함한 여러 가지 리포터, 그러니까 무형자산 리포트라든지 뭐 인적 자산 리포터 또는 그 애니얼 리포트 안에도 이런 인적 자산 지수를 포함해서 그 공표하는 기업들이 그 외부 승인 기업들에서는 늘어나고 있는 추세입니다. 그런데 이제 이러한 인적 자산 지수들이 갖는 유용성에도 불구하고 그 인적 자산이라는 개념이 갖는 근본적인 그 문제점에 의해서 두 가지 그 이슈가 등장할 수 있다라고 할 수가 있겠습니다. 먼저 지적할 수 있는 부분이 분석 수준 또는 그 인적 자산 지수에 있어서 측정 수준의 문제입니다. 실제로 그 현재 인적 자본이라는 개념 자체가 가정하고 있는 성과 창출의 메커니즘을 보면은 이 개인주의적인 관점에 기초하고 있습니다. 따라서 이러한 논리를 따르자면은 그러니까 회사의 그러니까 조직 수준에서의 성과라는 것은 개인 수준에서의 성과의 종합과 같아야 된다. 그래서 그 인적 자본의 효율성을 그 측정하는 그 HCI의 관점에서 보면은 그 슬라이드에 나타나듯이 그 조직 전체 수준에서의 그 인풋 대비 아웃풋의 비율이 각 종업은 개개인 수준에서의 인풋 아웃풋을 측정하는 것의 종합과 같아야 된다는 그 전제가 성립될 수 있는데, 실제로 그러면 같느냐? 그러니까 수학적으로도 사실 보면은 이게 같아지는 경우는 개개인한테 투입된 인풋하고 아웃풋이 비례하는 형태로 분배가 됐을 때만이 실제로 이 조직 수준에서의 측정한 토탈 인풋, 토탈 아웃풋의 비율이 개개인 수준, 종업은 개개인 수준에서의 인풋 아웃풋을 그 측정한 종합과 같아지는 그런 수준이 있습니다. 그런데 실제로 보면은, 그죠? 우리가 비즈니스 포트폴리오에서도 얘기하고, 인적 자산에 대해서 우리가 포트폴리오의 개념에서 바라본다면은 사실은 인풋은 적고, 아웃풋은 큰 것이 결과적으로 보면 HCI를 높이는 그림입니다. 근데 실제 그 종업은 개개인의 관점에서 보면 인풋이 적다는 것은 동기부여 요인에서 굉장히 부정적인 영향을 미치는 것이죠. 그래서 이렇게 본다면 과연 그 인적 자산 지수를, 지금 대부분의 인적 자산 지수는 사실은 그 계량적으로 측정할 수 있는 수준 자체라든지 아니면 그 지표가 갖는 재무적인 성격 때문에 그 조직 수준에서밖에 측정이 되지 않고 있다. 그래서 종업은 개개인 수준에서 측정할 수 있는 것은 국히 제한된 일부 그 직무 집단, 예를 들자면 뭐 세일즈 폴스라든지 이런 부분에 국한되어 있기 때문에 과연 이런 분석 수준의 문제를 어떻게 극복할 것인가라는 것이 굉장히 중요한 이슈로 그 대두될 수 있다고 저희가 생각을 하고 있고요. 근데 이제 그 단순히 분석 수준의 문제만 이 HCI에 존재를 하느냐? 저희가 생각할 때는 사실은 단순한 그 분석 수준의 문제를 넘어서서 근본적으로 회사 내에서 성과가 창출되는 기본적인 메커니즘에 대한 그 과정에 있어서 좀 더 그 다르게 접근할 필요성이 있지 않나는 생각을 가지고 있습니다. 그 전통적으로 볼 때 앞서 말씀드린 것처럼 그 개인주의적인 관점에서는 그 현재 성과주 인사관리라는 것이 직원 개개인들의 경쟁을 통해서 고성과를 창출한다라고 얘기를 하지만은 사실 많은 경우 우리는 실제로 집단 수준에서의 성과 창출이라는 것은 그 개개인들의 협력을 통해서 그 시너지 효과가 난다라는 것을 개념적으로 알고 있습니다. 그러면 이러한 협력이라는 것이 실제 이기적인 개개인들이 그 속해 있는 기업 집단 안에서 가능할 것인가? 라는 의문을 가지게 되는데, 최근에 많은 연구들이 이런 그 이기주의적인 개개인들 간에서도 충분히 그 협력이 가능하고 이런 협력을 통해서 집단 수준에서의 어떤 전체적인 성과를 높이는 것이 가능하다라는 주장이 나오고 있고, 이런 개념을 뒷받침하기 위해서 인적 자본이라는 개념의 어떤 그 하나의 어떤 대체되는 개념으로서 사회적 자본, 소셜 캐피탈의 개념을 얘기하고 있는 그 학자들이 있습니다. 그래서 사회적 자본이라는 것은 그 개념적으로 보면은 우리가 어떤 특정한 요즘 많이 쓰는 용어로 네트워크라는 것이 존재한다라고 하면 그 네트워크에 그 속해 있는 그 구성원들이 그 네트워크를 통해서 동원할 수 있는 모든 유형, 무형의 자원뿐만 아니라 그 네트워크 구조적인 특성으로 인해서 그 이끌어낼 수 있는 효율성, 그 전체를 사회적 자본이라고 얘기를 할 수 있습니다. 그래서 이런 사회적 자본을 얘기하는 그 학자들 같은 경우는 최근에 보면은 크게 세 가지 유형의 네트워크를 많이 얘기합니다. 그러니까 뭐 흔히 말하는 그 친구 네트워크, 프렌드십 네트워크하고 그 다음에 기업 내에서의 그 정보 교류 네트워크, 그 다음에 실제 공식적인 업무들이 그 이루어지는 프로세스 네트워크, 이 세 가지를 얘기를 하는데, 국내 기업의 그 관점에서 볼 때 그 지나친 어떤 친구 네트워크라든지 다른 비공식화된 조직에서의 동행 가능한 네트워크의 강조는 굉장히 부정적인 감정을 일으킬 수가 있다. 왜냐하면 개념적으로 우리가 가지고 있는 그 어떤 사내, 항맥, 인맥, 연출 이런 것에 대한 부정적인 감정이 존재하고 있는 상태에서 이런 그 네트워크가 가지는 굉장히 그 전반적으로 창출해낼 수 있는 효율성에 대한 강조가 마치 어떤 파벌주의를 다시 조성하는 그런 오해를 불러일으킬 수도 있는데, 사실 제가 생각할 때는 지금 국내에서 많은 이런 네트워크를 얘기하는 부분에 있어서도 지나치게 그 기업 조직 내 비공식적인 네트워크의 유용성을 강조하는 부분은 문제가 있다. 사실 기업이 네트워크의 효율성을 강조하고 이런 네트워크의 효율성을 통해서 사회적 자본을 동원한다는 것은 1차적으로 봤을 때는 공식적인 업무, 워크 프로세스 네트워크에 그 주목을 해야 되고, 이런 개개인한테 주어진 직무에 요구되는 그 역할 행동을 가장 기업이 추구하는 전략적인 목표에 부합하도록 어떻게 동기부여할 것인가 라는 관점에서 접근을 해야 된다. 그래서 우리가 생각하는 인센티브 시스템이라는 것, 보상에 있어서는 인센티브 시스템이라는 것도 단순히 인센티브 유형이 뭐 집단 인센티브가 있고 개인 인센티브가 있는데, 이 중에 뭐 성과주의라는 것은 집단 간의 경쟁을 강조하기 때문에 개인 수준의 인센티브가 굉장히 중요하다라고 할 것이 아니라, 어떻게 하면은 지금 말씀드린 것처럼 그 집단 수준에서 사회적 자본을 활성화할 수 있는지에 대한 좀 더 그 체계적인 연구를 통해서 그 요즘 많이 얘기하는 것처럼 그 진화적으로 안정적인 전략이 각 종업원 개개인의 실제 역할 행동 모델이 될 수 있도록 하는 그런 연구들이 필요하지 않나라는 생각을 하고요. 이런 부분에 있어서 일종의 도움이 될 수 있는 것이 실제 기업의 직무 네트워크에 대해서 개념적으로 한번 분석을 해봐야 된다. 그래서 그 예를 들어서 저희 회사에 그 직무 네트워크를 최근에 실제 네트워크 분석을 해봤습니다. 그랬을 때 나타나는 특성이, 그 네트워크의 종류를 얘기할 때 크게 두 가지 네트워크를 얘기를 합니다. 랜덤 네트워크하고 그 다음에 이제 흔히 말하는 스몰월드라는, 그러니까 랜덤하지 않은 네트워크를 얘기하면, 랜덤 네트워크라는 것은 그 네트워크에 속해 있는 노드들, 흔히 말하는 노드라고 얘기하는데, 여기서는 이제 직무들이 얘기죠. 개개인이 수행하는 직무들 간의 관계가, 그러니까 서로 관계를 맺을 확률적으로 랜덤하다는 얘기인데, 실제로 저희가 직무 네트워크를 조사를 해보면 랜덤한 게 아니라 전체 직무 네트워크 안에는 몇몇 개의 분파가 있습니다. 이 분파는 우리가 이전에 알고 있던 밸류 체인이나 아니면 기능적 분류에 따른 그런 집단하고는 상당히 다르게 크로스 펑셔널하게 이런 직무들이 엮여가지고 나타나는다는 걸 확인할 수 있고, 그런 하위 집단 안에서는 그 핵심적인 역할을 하는 허브가 존재한다는 것도 확인할 수 있고, 이런 허브들이 그 집단 간에는 브로커 역할을 하는 직무에 의해서 연결이 되고 있다. 그래서 이런 허브나 브로커의 역할을 하는 직무들을 통해서 우리가 이런 것들을 그 핵심 직무로서 육성을 한다든지 아니면 경력 경로를 설계를 한다든지 하는 측면에서 굉장히 유용하게 활용할 수 있다는 측면에서, 실제로 그 단순히 각각의 직무의 담당자가 가지고 있는 체화된 그 능력, 인적 자본이 주목할 것이 아니라 그런 집단이 가질 수 있는 어떤 집단 지성이라든지 아니면 전체적인 사회적 자본의 관점에서 그 성과 창출의 문제에 그 접근할 필요성이 있다라는 생각을 하게 됐습니다. 그래서 저희 그 발표는 일단 그 인적 자본에 대해서 우리가 조금 회의적 인식을 가지고 보다 성과 창출에서 사회적 자본에 관심을 가질 필요가 있다는 그 얘기로 발표를 마치도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing the concept of social networks. Our discussant today is Kwang Ho Kim. What we'll do is the discussant will ask each presenter one question. The presenter will respond, and then we'll open up to the general Q&A. So, Mr. Kwang Ho Kim, can you ask the first question?
말씀 잘 들었습니다. 제가 요약을 하면 첫 번째 발표자께서는 그 지표에 의한 HR 성과 관리의 중요성에 대해서 말씀하셨고, 두 번째 발표자께서는 그런 지표에 의한 성과 관리를 할 수 있는 근간이 되는 정보 시스템에 대해서 말씀하셨고, 세 번째 발표자께서는 그간의 HR 관리의 문제점에 대해서 말씀하시고 그것을 극복할 수 있는 협력 조직에 대해서 말씀하셨습니다. 그럼 첫 번째 발표자이신 마크 우드하우스 씨에게 질문 드리겠습니다. 그 지표에 의한 성과 관리 및 벤치마킹은 유럽이나 미국에서 많이 활용하고 있는 것 같은데, 그건 아마 그 나라들이 대부분 글로벌 기업으로서 규모가 상당히 큰 회사들이기 때문에 그런 필요성이 있다고 느꼈습니다. 근데 한국 기업들은 그 글로벌 기업들에 비해서 규모가 좀 상대적으로 작은데, 우리 한국 기업들도 그런 지표에 의한 HR 관리를 효과적으로 할 수 있는지, 그런 방법이 있는지 한번 여쭈고자 합니다.
I think the important question is around the extent to which the organisation wants to actually have some form of measurement. Certainly, yes, if you look at UK, Europe, North America, a lot of the work that we certainly do with organisations is at a global level and under large organisations. But we also do considerable amounts of work with smaller organisations that may be country-based, may be regionally based. And I think the important question is in terms of, is the HR function itself in a position, or is the CEO in a real position to say, we really want to see what sort of value add we're getting from the people part of the business. And I think therefore size to a certain extent is not an issue. It's more important to say, where's the organisation currently sitting? What's it actually trying to deliver in its strategy? If we're talking then about the HR function is clearly trying to respond to those business needs, to those business plans, and it's putting together, you know, the selection, the retention, the development, all those sorts of policies, practices, reward, etc., that really we're trying to align to what the business is trying to do. I think the key question then is, can we actually measure how successful we're being and measure it on a bottom line impact terms? So I think in answer to the question, I don't think organisational size is an issue. I think the key question is, does the organisation really want to show a return on investment? And the sort of methodologies that I talked about earlier on, hopefully you will have seen, are equally applicable to a small business. And certainly in the last couple of years, I've done work with organisations in the UK that are 20 to 30 million UK pounds sort of turnover, about 30 to 45 million US dollars. Now I don't know how that sort of converts in terms of the Korean currency, but in that sense I don't think size is an issue. I think the important thing is the measurement, and I think a lot of CEOs, even in small organisations, are increasingly wanting to understand how that return on investment can be improved.
두 번째 질문자인 던 쿠퍼 윌리엄스 씨에게 질문드리겠습니다. 정보에 근거한 HR 의사결정 시스템의 중요성에 대해서는 공감하고 있는데, 실제로 많은 한국 기업들이 이미 기간 시스템이나 이런 ERP 시스템을 구축한 걸로 알고 있는데요. 효과적인 인사관리 정보 시스템을 구축하기 위해서 기존의 ERP 시스템을 많이 변경하지도 않고서도 효과적으로 도입할 수 있는 그런 방안들이 있는지요?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much. I think that there's a number of aspects that you need to look at. First of all companies today have applications that have been bought over time as part of their evolution. So I would expect that there's an ERP system in place, there's a database that is in place, and that there will be a functional HR system that is in place. One of the beauties today is when you need to do anything of an intelligence nature or use the intelligence capability that is available, we can draw the data from any system. So there is no immediate impact on investment. So the investment is already made. companies that use ERP have a huge investment in them, and there's a huge amount of data that is stored. The HRM systems, similarly, have historical data that goes back years that are very important to the organization. And one of the fears of moving forward is, well, how would I translate all of that data into a modern system? The organization that I work for has what we call an agnostic approach to databases. We can draw data from any database. Our methodology is to take the data, integrate it with the other data that is in the organization, and bring it into a data mart, and within that data mart begin to do the analytics and the statistical analysis that is needed to give you the reports and to report back on individuals, departments, or the company as a whole. So the answer to the question is that your investment in the past is not lost. The investment in data is not lost. The investment for the future is to have an intelligence strategy that draws that data from all of the disparate systems that you have in your organization into a central data mart where it is reusable. So the application that you place on it, the work that you do on it, is used not only by the HR department but can be used by the management team to understand it and have a holistic view of what's happening in the company, whether that is a modern system or a legacy system that you have in place.
네, 답변 감사드립니다. 세 번째 발표자인 이승철 단부님께 질문 드리겠습니다. 협력 조직의 중요성에 대해서 저도 진심으로 공감합니다. 국내 대표적인 IT 회사인 KT에서는 협력 조직을 효과적으로 운영하기 위해서 어떤 제도들이 있고 또 어떤 인센티브가 있는지 말씀해 주시면 고맙겠습니다.
예. 실제 기업의 사례를 말씀드리기에는 그렇게 이제 쉬운 일은 아닌 것 같고요. 일단 먼저 말씀드리고 싶은 내용이 실제 기업에 있어서 직원들의 나타나는 역할 행동이라는 것은 요즘 얘기되는 것처럼 복잡계의 성격을 띈다. 그래서 굉장히 그러니까 초기 조건이 미묘한 차이를 나타낼 때 장기적으로 볼 때 직원들이 회사 내에서 나타나게 되는 역할 행동이라는 것은 굉장히 큰 편차를 낳게 됩니다. 그렇게 본다면은 우리가 뭔가 지금 말씀드린 것 같은 협업을 위해서 이전에 생각해내지 못했던 새로운 제도를 만들어서 새로운 타입의 인센티브를 도입한다거나 이러는 것이 중요한 것이 아니라 인센티브 제도를 하나 설계를 한다거나 아니면 성과관리 시스템 하나를 설계할 때도 미묘한 제도의 차이가 실제로는 엄청나게 직원의 행동에 있어서 결과적으로 다른 차이를 가져온다는 것을 유심할 필요가 있다고 생각을 하고요. 그런 점에서 저희 같은 경우는 실제 완전히 다른 기업에서 생각하지 못했던 새로운 제도를 지금 도입하려고 한다기보다는 기존의 시스템들이 가지고 있었던 미묘한 문제점들을 해결해가면서 장기적으로 봤을 때 회사의 발전에 기여할 수 있는 형태로 조정을 해나가겠다는 생각을 가지고 진행하고 있다고 말씀드릴 수가 있겠습니다. 그래서 1년을 들면 이건 꼭 저희 회사의 예가 아니라 국내 기업들 같은 경우는 성과관리 시스템에 있어서도 개인의 업적 평가를 할 때 목표관리 시스템 MBO라는 것들을 도입을 했지만 실제로 평가는 어떻게 이루어지냐면 강제할당식으로 최종적으로 평가를 합니다. 그렇다고 본다면 이게 진정하게 MBO냐라고 얘기를 한다면 절대 MBO가 아니고요. 그런 메커니즘의 성과관리 메커니즘의 기초에서 또 인센티브를 짰을 때 이 인센티브가 과연 자기에게 주어진 목표를 성취하기 위한 성취 동기를 자극하느냐 결코 그렇지 않다는 거죠. 오히려 이런 경우는 전반적인 회사 내 역할 행동이라는 것이 게임 이론으로 본다면은 완전히 제로성 게임이 됩니다. 그래서 실제로는 우리가 우리 회사의 외부의 경쟁사와 경쟁하는 것이 아니라 조금은 상호간에 주어진 똑같은 크기의 파일을 놓고 누가 더 가져가냐의 싸움으로 변질되게 만든다는 거죠. 사실 그래서 중요한 것은 이러한 초기 조건의 민감성에 따라서 조금만 변화를 줘서 실제로 기업이 창출하고자 하는 고성과를 높이는 것이 더 중요하지 않나라고 생각을 합니다.
Thank you very much. We're doing very well for time, so Mr. Kim, we'll come back to you before the end of the session for any final thoughts or questions. What I want to do now is open up the floor to questions. I want to group the questions, maybe take a first round of 3 questions, come back to the speakers, and then go for another round. I see one hand here, so we'll take the first question here if there's a microphone. Microphone is coming from the back. I see another hand in the back, so first we'll start here, then we have another person in the back.
Thank you, moderator. And so issue is measurement, right? ROI, how we can ensure excellence in precise and scientific measurement. And Mark, you elaborated on that. And but on the other hand, Mr. Eason-Chul has emphasized the importance of alternative system that is called the social network, and emphasizing the collaborative work. And so I think to sense now the facing is really tricky, because even based on human capital and based ROI metric system that requires tremendous preciseness and scientific measurement, then so he's talking about another one. So, you know, there's how we can ensure measurement, and first one is precise reliability, and second one is validity. Validity is internal validity and external validity. And so tremendous requires a scientific approach. But Mr. Lee emphasized the importance of another one. So my question goes to Mark and Don. And I really want to know that's how nice if we successfully measuring based on Mr. Lee's the approach. So I think it's a collaborative work is very important, not only in Korean context but universally, but also importance of social capital based metric system of ROI. So what do you think is a possible way? Give us one, each of you. Thank you.
Okay. Let's take the second question. Someone in the back had a hand up. Right in the back. Can you raise your hand again? There.
My name is Hyung-Wee Kim, and I'm currently work in the vocational training center of GMDale. As a clerical intern, and especially these days, I've seen a lot of news that an employee steals the company's secret information illegally and sells to other countries. So I think, according to this kind of matters, I strongly believe that every employee must have not only outstanding abilities but also substantial credit that makes the company trust himself. So I'd like to know that what kind of effort do the big global corporations like PwC, SAS, and KT, what do you do to prevent the kind of matters in advance, and what do you do to keep the talented workforces stay and work in the company as long as possible? I want to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more question this round. If not, then let's take these two questions and we'll do another round from there. So can we start with Mark?
Okay, I think the first question was around the sort of reliability and the validity of the data, both within the organisation and indeed external to the organisation. And I think one of the important things, if I think of our methodology, which now we've been looking at measurement for about 20 years in organisations, I think one of the key things is, the first comment I would make, it's not an exact science, obviously, because we're talking, as you would appreciate, with people, the people dimension and so on. But I think some of the ways of ensuring some consistency and validity are, first of all, we have very, very specific definitions around each of the metrics, so very clear, very specific. And those have been sort of validated and tested over a number of years. And we find that in most organizations, there is certainly an understanding of that. But in the work that we do, we spend quite a bit of time working with an organization on how do you understand those definitions? Because I think the second point is the external validity of that. So if we're looking to compare ourselves with other organizations in terms of that data, those sort of performance results, then what we need to be sure of clearly is that we're comparing, apples with apples or like-for-like information. And I think one of the important things there, again, through the work that we've done, is to have the consistency of definition. So if we take a definition of full-time equivalent or revenue per full-time equivalent or cost per full-time equivalent, then we would have very clear definitions around what that means. But I would obviously have to say that yes, there are some statistical correlations between certain elements of the data, but in reality, obviously, we can't get absolute 100% perfection. And what I tend to say to HR people is that even if we've got data in an organization that is 60 or 70% accurate, we still have an awful lot more understanding than we had before we actually started to look at the data. So I think hopefully that answers some of the things about the internal and external consistency issue.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and I really appreciate what Mark had to say. I think that there sometimes is this issue about we don't have all of the data, or the data that we have is not sufficient, or it's not accurate. But we're moving into an era now of very sophisticated tools and applications being available for organizations to ensure that the data is looked at in a completely different way. First of all, there's the integration of data, federation of data, making sure that the data has similarities in it, the cleansing of data in order to assist organizations to have a more accurate view. If the senior people within your organizations are going to take strategic decisions in the marketplace, and the marketplace that we know is changing very, very eclectically. We could be going down a different path tomorrow. There could be new changes coming, new technologies, new issues hitting us. Then I believe we need to get more accurate data in the organization. To take a strategic decision based on 50 or 60% accuracy, well, you might as well throw bones or go to the casino and throw a dice. Now, I think we see a move now in the marketplace for what is known as data integration technologies, data federation, master data management capability that has both scale and speed to do this accurately on a regular basis. The other thing is that if you don't have accurate data, or if your data isn't accurate enough, how will you use that data to model for the future? Our organization prides itself that we have a capability to do predictive analytics. So it's one thing to understand what your organization has done in the past and use that data to model the way you want to go forward. But if you can get your data to a point that you know that it's been refreshed on a daily, weekly basis, then you can start to use that same data to model predictiveness of what is going to happen. So if you made changes using that data within the organization, organizationally, what would the impact be on profit? What would the impact be on individuals? What would be the impact on productivity within your manufacturing organization? These models have been used very, very clearly. There's a bank in Italy that is now using the data that they have regarding their employees to predict when people will leave the organization. So they now have an accuracy at around about 80%, looking at any department and group of people, predicting when somebody might leave the organization due to the factors that are derived from the data that they have captured. But to your point, data deteriorates at around about 25% per annum. That means that your data is constantly in flux. So I think we need to go back to processes, and if you're going to be driven by performance management and use data and intelligence, then an investment needs to be made in ensuring that the fact-based single point of view of data within your organization is going to assist you to make those decisions.
Thank you. Can we go to you, Mr. Lee, on the second question about how to retain talent. If you could start us off, but feel free if you have any comments to make on the first question. Mr. Lee.
먼저 아까 핵심 인재 유지와 관련해서 질문해 주신 부분에 대해서 간단하게 답변을 드리면요. 그러니까 저희 회사 같은 경우도 다른 기업들과 마찬가지로 굉장히 일상적인 핵심 인재와 관련된 프로그램들, 그러니까 핵심 인재를 선발하고 이 사람들에 대해서 차별적인 어떤 교육 기회를 부여한다거나 이런 프로그램들을 가지고 있고요. 근데 이제 최근에 저희가 좀 관심을 가지고 있는 부분들은 저희 직원들이 많이 가지고 있는 불만 중에 하나가 회사 내 어떤 커리어 패스에 대한 불명확성, 과연 들어와서 어떤 식으로 자기가 이 IT 업계에서 굉장히 중요한 핵심 인재로 커나갈 수 있는지 어떤 실제 직무 경험을 통해서 그런 역량을 쌓아나가는 문제에 대한 불만이 있었기 때문에 그런 부분들에 대해서는 아까 말씀드린 것처럼 실제 이제 직무 네트워크 분석을 통해서 핵심 직무들에 대한 새로운 경력 경로를 설계하는 작업을 지금 현재 진행을 하고 있다라고 말씀을 드릴 수가 있겠습니다. 이제 제가 첫 번째 답변에도 조금 제 의견을 말씀드릴 수 있다면 말씀드렸으면 좋겠네요. 그러니까 제가 너무 이제 챌린지하게 발표를 드리는지 모르지만, 전반적으로 얘기할 때 사회적 자본의 개념의 중요성을 얘기하는 분들도 일반적으로 얘기하는 휴먼 캐피탈 개념 자체를 부정하는 건 아닙니다. 휴먼 캐피탈 개념 자체도 굉장히 중요하지만은 이 휴먼 캐피탈 개개인이 가지고 있는 어떤 역량이라는 것이 전체 집단으로서의 사회적 자본 안에서 어떤 식으로 유기적으로 발현될 수 있도록 하는 것이 중요하다라는 문제에 집착을 하는 것이라고 할 수가 있고, 그런 의미에서 본다면은 일단 두 지표의 개념적인 관계에 있어서는 어떤 서로 이제 대체제의 개념이 아니라 보완제의 개념으로 보는 것이 더 타당하지 않나는 생각을 가지고 있고요. 그리고 이제 소셜 캐피탈 자체를 측정하는 문제에 있어서는 일단 네트워크 시어리를 연구하는 학자들이 많은 메저먼트를 사실은 아시겠지만 개발을 해놓고 있습니다. 그런데 단지 이제 저희와 같은 그대 기업에 있어서의 실제 이런 네트워크 데이터 자체를 게더링하는 것이 그리 간단한 문제는 아니기 때문에 이런 메저먼트와 관련해서 이걸 기업에 적용하는 데 있어서는 소셜 캐피탈의 개념에 있어서는 조금 데이터 게더링의 문제가 여전히 남아있다라고 이제 제가 보완적으로 설명을 드릴 수가 있겠습니다.
Can I give some views on it? I think this is a very interesting subject because none of us like the surprises when somebody leaves our organization and the person that is key or strategic to what you're doing leaves without notice, and all of a sudden we have a crisis of having to re-employ. We have methodologies that are employed using data, and an organization in Italy that is using one of our systems has built a massive employee database where they keep in there all of the statistics and data regarding that employee, education, time of service, courses that they've taken, and all of the progress regarding that person. Now this is data driven. This is data regarding who they are. Obviously, one of the retention factors that you have in your organization needs to be, are you the best place to work? Is there an environment that is conducive to somebody staying? Our company, for instance, has a global average of employee churn of around 5%, 10,000 employees in our organization. We're very proud of that, and part of that is the facilities and all of the things that we offer. But more than that, this organization uses a data warehouse, and that data warehouse is then modeled to find out certain things. So the sort of questions they can ask out of the data that they're gathering now are like these. Which employees are at the highest risk of voluntarily leaving the organization? And again, the data that is captured, the interviews that are done of past people that have left voluntarily, those that have left involuntarily, all of that data is captured and built into models, and those models help us think that way. What reasons do employees have for wanting to leave? Does it meet the model? Are there things that have been changed in the organization? Which reasons have the most statistical significance to why employees leave? So it might be different for different companies, and there might be a statistical measure that says they are leaving because of dissatisfaction with the management, environment. It might be due to the fact that the pay scales and the incentives are not matching what is happening in the marketplace. What is the profile of employees most likely to leave? Are they a certain age profile? Are they male or female? Are they married with children? Are they single? What are the reasons why people are leaving the organization? How is the risk distributed throughout the organization? So this is important in terms of strategy, looking at the organization and looking at those profiles and seeing where the risk is. And then the last one that I have here, are the top performers at risk of leaving or actually leaving? And you'll know that this is one of the issues that you have in your organization, that the competitors will look at your top performers. Wouldn't it be good to know, to have at least an idea of why they are leaving, or are they leaving, and is it something that you can stop by bringing about management changes?
I think just one further sort of comment on that. I think the important thing from an HR perspective is Don's just described some of the outcomes in the sense of analysing the data. I think the other issue for me on talent management is also about saying what are we then doing in response to that. So, you know, if I come back to that model of attracting, developing, retaining and using talent in an organisation, I think for HR the challenge is really to say, what's our employer brand in the marketplace in the first instance? You know, are we attracting the right talent? And if we are we then delivering on that proposition that we're putting out there for attracting talent? And we find in many organisations in an outcome sense that people are leaving very early because they become dissatisfied with what's actually being delivered relative to what their expectation is, you know, in terms of the organisation that they're joining. I mean, similarly, is there what I call joined up writing between those people in the organisation responsible for reward, those people responsible for resourcing, those people responsible for organisational design and development and talent movement? And my experience as sort of 30 years as an HR professional rather than a consultant was, it was not that often that you found connectivity even within the function itself around those sorts of issues. So reward wouldn't talk that often to organisational development, who wouldn't talk that often to the recruiting people. And I think if we're talking really about having a talent retention strategy in an organisation, it's key that there's connectivity between each of those, and that dialogue happens regularly in the sense that there's a real understanding about what are we doing with this talent when we've identified it, when we've got it into the organisation, and then how are we developing it and using it effectively? And I think quite often that connectivity isn't there between the various aspects of within the HR function itself even, let alone the organisation and then the communication with the executives who are essentially responsible for developing that talent.
Thank you. We have time for questions from the audience. See one hand here. Raise your hand, yes. Someone's coming with the microphone.
My name is Don Kim from Chengdu University. Actually, this conference focused on HR area. As a human resource professor, even though we really talk about the productivity or profit of the company, actually HR people should focus on the satisfaction level of their employees. I wonder about this, as we talked about the human capital and the return on investment, I wonder, two of the Westerners, is this the new concept or the specific and detailed measurement really enhance the satisfaction level of the employees? And my second question goes to the second question is, Mr. Lee Seung-cheol brought a very interesting comment about the cross-cultural differences. For example, like as we apply the specific, detailed measurement techniques, is it really this type of the method could be applied to the Korean companies where collectively still the prominent, the culture? So would you comment on these questions?
Okay, is there any other question? We could take a... One hand, two hands. Okay, we'll take the last two questions this round, right from the front row.
저희 나라는 아름다운 문화가 있습니다. 제가 연장자거든요. 옆에 있는 분이 젊은 분이 돼가지고 저한테 양보를 해가지고 제가 말씀할 수 있는 기회를 가진 것을 영광으로 생각합니다. 저는 천안 삼신밸브라는 데가 있습니다. 삼신밸브에서 온 기술고문 박영원입니다. 제가 엉뚱한 질문을 드리는지 혹시 모르겠는데요. 사스 부사장 윌리엄스 부사장님께 좀 질문을 드리고자 합니다. 질문 드리고자 하는 거는 지금 어느 기업이나요, 성장 발전할 수 있는 그런 때가 있고 잘 나갈 때가 있고요. 또 아주 어려운 때가 있습니다. 상당히 어려운 때가 있는데 제가 특히 질문 드리고자 하는 거는 어려울 때 모든 구성원들이요. 그러니까 모든 인적 자원들이 그 회사의 비전, 그 다음에 전략, 목적을 달성하기 위해서 나 봉급 한 번 받겠다. 물론 가봐다. 그렇지만은 목적을 달성하기 위해서 내가 무엇인가 해야 되겠다. 이러한 공유된 쉐어드 배류, 공유된 가치관과 기업 문화가 뭔지 좀 말씀해 주시기 바랍니다. 조금 엉뚱한 질문인지 모르겠습니다. 하여튼 말씀을 해 주시면은 저희가 기업하는데 큰 힘이 되겠습니다. 맞습니다.
We're going to take them from the top. Okay.
예, 제 이름은
last question. Sorry.
제 이름은 권주영이고요. 현재 학생입니다. 지금 강연을 들으면서 구체적인 이상적 인적 자원의 목표치가 확실치 않아가지고 거기에 대한 질문을 드리려고 하는데요. 제 개인적으로 생각했을 때 가장 효율적이고 이상적 인적 자원을 평가하기 위한 수치로는 투입 비용과 그리고 산출을 따졌을 때 어느 정도의 투입 비용을 들여서 그리고 몇 배의 수익을 창출할 수 있는 그런 인재, 즉 다시 말해서 그 인재가 벌어들일 수 있는 수익 중에 몇 퍼센트의 비용이 있어야지 가장 이상적인 그런 인재로 평가할 수 있는지, 간단한 수치지만 가장 확실할 것 같아서 질문드립니다. 세 분께 여쭤보겠습니다.
Okay, would you like to start, Mark?
Yeah, okay. I think just in response to the first question, and I'm not sure if I clearly understood the question, but I think it was around the whole issue of is this return on investment and measurement a relatively new initiative in sort of UK, Europe and so on. I think in response to that, I think certainly for us as an organisation, we've been involved in this sort of work now for 15 to 20 years. I think from an HR point of view, I think there's much more pressure now coming from chief executives to start to get into some form of understanding of return on investment. And I know 10 years ago when I was an HRD, I was in a fortunate position of saying to a chief executive, or my chief executive, this particular initiative or program will make a difference to the organisation. Trust me on that, and I think I was lucky in those days to be able for the CEO to say, yes, okay, go ahead. But I think increasingly now, the challenge of, cost reduction, as we've talked about, of improving performance, particularly in the back office arena in organisations, I think there is really increasing pressure now, first of all for the internal type measurement, secondly for the ability to see how that stacks up against the external world. And then thirdly, I think, this external reporting on social responsibility side of things, where organisations, certainly UK and Europe, are being increasingly put under pressure, not just to have an annual report that's got financial data in, but actually a corporate social responsibility report that will have much more about the employees, what's happening in terms of their training, turnover, all those sorts of things. So I think from that perspective, it's something which, going back to my earlier point, I think it's quite important, simply because the pressures, I think, will come externally for that. And I think also internally, HR is now trying increasingly to become, the business partner, which I guess you've been talking about in the conference. And I think that means HR has to talk with a more business language. And I think that does involve data, it does involve those sorts of aspects. So for me, I think to bring HR to the table in a more effective way, it's one of the ways of doing that. But I see it developing further, and I think there are going to be external pressures to do that, and also the internal pressures from executives to understand that return on investment much more. In terms of your point on the collectivism and so on in terms of organisations, I think to me that's an important aspect of really getting improved organisational performance if we have collective teams, etc., and that's my understanding, social collectivism and so on. But I think, again, the organisational setting, even if it's that type of setting, can still give you the opportunity of creating the actual output measures, as the gentleman over there was actually talking about. So I think it can be applied in the different sort of settings in an organisation.
Don, would you like to say something about the shared values?
Yeah, I think, again, with the shared values, the typical old methodology was that the boardroom would meet and they would set the values, and the values would hopefully flow down to all of the organization. And I think that's changed nowadays. We find nowadays that smart companies are doing external employee satisfaction reviews, and these reviews come back into the management and allow them to understand where those shared values are. You'd be surprised if you don't do that, of the frankness and the good information that comes back into your organization when you do an unbiased or external employee satisfaction survey. And those surveys will indicate to you whether the values are really shared. So what are the values of the organization? How are they communicated down through the organization? And are there instances where the employees are in a forum where they can discuss what those values are and either agree or disagree with them? So I think there are important management capabilities that need to be infused down through the organization. I think we have seen a lot of pushback coming now in my country, in Australia, and in the US, where there are so-called values that have been driven down into the organization, and then we find that incentive schemes are not matched with the values that we're talking about. So chief executives are making 20, 30, 40 times what a departmental head would make due to profit taking out of the organization. There's a lot of collective forces coming now saying this is unfair, it's not right, how do we share in the profits, how do we share in the values of the organization and the prosperity that it brings to the individuals there as well. And I think that unless a company starts to build a very open platform from its HR standpoint, that HR plays at the table and has sufficient data and modeling capability to forewarn organizations, I think we're going to see disruption. In the late 90s and in the early 2000s, we've seen disruption where outsourcing has started to play